Hello, and welcome to another episode of Outside the Lines with uh, with myself, Manny, and my co-host Renee. Um, and this is the show where we talk about humans and humanity and the things that define us, and also the things we think define us. But before I get into all that, I just want to say that, as some of you may know, there is a strike going on in Hollywood, uh, a writer's strike. And I just want to say, as a published author myself, that we stand with both myself and my co host. We stand with the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, and with SAG AFTRA, and hope that this situation gets resolved uh, fairly quickly. Also, our hearts goes out to people in California who are being affected right now by Typhoon Hillary, or Hurricane Hillary, as it's also called, and hope that everyone's okay. Um, Here in Texas, we know all about hurricanes. We've suffered through them ourselves, so and we know how difficult it is. So that's that. On today's program, we're going to be talking about mythology, uh, telling tales about ourselves, as the title screen says there. And first of all, we have to say, well, what is mythology? What is a myth? Well, right now in popular usage, myth is often thought of as meaning something that isn't true, or something that's false, or things like that. Uh, but myth in classic literature and in religious terms refers to something much broader. But in the simplest terms, a myth, as our subtitle suggests, are stories that cultures tell about themselves and people tell about themselves, but they're idealized versions of those stories. For example, there's something called the myth of the Old West, where the West of the late 19th century, late 1800s, is often uh, idealized, glamorized. It's all about good guys and bad guys, and I mean, we've seen it in countless movies, TV shows. Entire careers have been built on it, like John Wayne, for example, and Randolph Scott, and others like him. Um, and so, like I said, it's a romanticized version of what actually happened during those times. In fact, in one of the westerns, in what I would think, or at least in my opinion, is probably one of the best westerns ever made, uh, called "My Darling Clementine" with Henry Fonda. At the very end, no, I'm sorry, not that one. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is the one I was thinking of. At the end of the movie, there's a discussion between two reporters, a younger one and an older one, and the younger one, somebody has already told the story through a flashback, and the younger one says, "Well, do you think any of that is true?" And the older reporter says, "Oh, it doesn't matter." When the And the important line here is, when the truth becomes a legend, print the legend. And that's basically what mythology is. It's the legend that has come out of truth. But also, myths and mythologies also refer to older religions, or religions that really aren't practiced anymore, like Greek mythology, Greek and Roman mythology, uh, you know, uh, I just had it in my head. Oh, Viking mythology, Norse mythology, things like that. In fact, Joseph Campbell, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, calls mythology other people's religion. Uh, so, let me bring up somebody who is definitely not a myth, but is a legend in her own time. and the Queen of Hair Hats, Miss Renee Jaworski.
I never know what you're gonna say when you introduce me, and you always like get it so you get me laughing when I come on screen because I always think of I'm always gonna say something really profound, and then you say something to introduce me, and it's hilarious. So you got me, and now my brain is fried. Yes, thank you. I am a legend in my own time. I appreciate that, Manny. Thank you. And we're getting so many comments. I just want to say to our live audience, thank you so much for tuning in and for being so engaged right now, right off the bat. We are off and running, and everybody wants to talk about this topic. So, Manny, Manny always has the pulse on culture and what's going on in culture. You got us, Manny, and we're off and running. Yeah.
We're off and running, yeah. So you and I had a discussion a while ago about myths,
Hmm.
and we were talking about Dolly Parton, for example, having her own sort of personal myth.
Yes.
There's the real person, there's the real Dolly, and then there's our image of Dolly. With the big pompadours
Sure.
or the big wigs and the outrageous clothes and her accoutrements, shall we say? Uh,
Lloyd's of London. They're actually
yes,
insured by, they are literally.
yes, they are. They are. So yeah, so that's part of creating a myth. But again, it's not. People think, or the word myth has come to be known as like I said, as something that isn't true or something that's false. But that's not entirely the case. It is a story. It is a way of creating a worldview that that, as I said, sort of romanticizes different versions.
Absolutely.
So let's go ahead and bring up our special guest today, who is also, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Alan Coffey.
And of course, I'm the man, the myth, and legend because humans are storytelling animals. That's how our brain operates.
That's
We
right.
unfortunately have to have a story about ourselves. We are the
Yeah,
hero of our own
we are the
stories.
heroes. Right, we are the heroes of our own stories. Although, according to, if you've ever seen the Batman movie, The Dark Knight, there's a character who says, we can either live long enough, or we can either die a hero, or live long enough to see ourselves become the villain.
Yeah.
But I don't
And
think
I have
anybody's
been,
ever the villain of their own story. We're always the hero.
Someone just said in the audience that he or she is the villain in their story. So I think that
Oh, all right.
sometimes
Well, you know
people
what?
struggle with
Sometimes,
self-image,
right,
or
right.
sometimes we allow our narratives to get outsourced by someone who is a nefarious source. Maybe it's even someone that we love, like our parents or our siblings or our friends, and they give us these stories about ourselves that might not even be true, but we believe them for
Mhm.
decades. And in their version, that you're the villain, and you can actually take that on and feel that I'm the monster. It does happen sometimes. It really comes down to whose narrative you choose to believe about your own life.
Right,
That's true.
exactly. Um,
With the whole like childhood emotional neglect,
Right.
psychological problem, uh, your parents didn't care enough to invest in your emotional story. So you just kind of have to make up your own based on their not really caring about you.
Yep. Exactly.
yeah. So let's talk about there's really more or less three different kinds of myths or mythologies. Uh, the one I think that a lot of people are familiar with when we say mythology, as I said earlier, is what we might call religious mythology. Things
Mhm.
like the Greek pantheon, Zeus and Hera, and all those characters, or well, Greco-Roman mythology, which is kind of the same. They just changed the names, or Viking mythology, Odin, and so on and so forth. Uh, and I mentioned Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell wrote a book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And what he determined through years of research is that a lot of hero stories and a lot of these religions and a lot of even personal mythologies follow a very similar pattern. There's a pattern to all these stories that cuts across cultures, that cuts across generations, that cuts across a lot of things like that. And it's often referred to as the monomyth. Although Campbell is often credited with coining that term, actually it was James Joyce who wrote Finnegan's Wake, who coined the term monomyth in Finnegan's Wake, as a matter of fact. But Campbell kind of took it and ran with it and said, you're right. Started looking at all of these and said, wait a minute, there does seem to be something called what he later called the hero's journey. And there's very specific steps that the hero of the story takes in order to accomplish whatever it is he's going to accomplish, or she. And we see that, and it's not just in the old mythologies. We see it in pop culture as well. Most notably in something like Star Wars, for example. George Lucas, in crafting that story, and even before he wrote the script, he was saying, well, how can I make this different from all these other stories? And he realized that there really wasn't anything different, that he very deliberately used Campbell, used other sources, and created this new myth, and invent. So he didn't invent the underlying story. It used the monomyth, the hero's journey, as the foundation, and then built upon that. And that's what happens. According to Campbell, that's what happened. There was kind of originally this sort of base story of the hero who is called to action, and he meets a wise person along the way to help him, and then he meets helpers, and he encounters obstacles along his path to enlightenment or whatever. And so pretty much every popular story that you've ever read, every popular movie that you've ever seen, has at its core the hero's journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw Alan really nodding his head a lot. Do you want to answer, Alan?
Oh, well, yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, the hero's journey, you find it as the template for so much, not only of actual, stories and mythology, but you find it sometimes as a template laid down over history as well, where people try to take the events of history and turn it into a hero's journey, whether or not those people actually were the heroes or not. And my experience has been is that just about all the movies that are really good, that people really enjoy and they're popular, they tend to have that hero's journey at their core. They may not have all the individual elements in there, but the basic storyline where a person starts here in the normal world and then passes into this other world where he has to do all these things and then come out again, that's definitely the hero's journey. Like, with one element of the whole hero's journey is the hero, he's changed by all of his experiences. And a rather tragic example you see is that in the Lord of the Rings, Frodo, he's gone, he's taken the ring, he's thrown it into Mount Doom, it's been destroyed. He goes back to the Shire, they have the scouring of the Shire, and Frodo comes to the realization he can't stay there. He has been so changed by his interaction with the elements in the hero's journey that, the Shire, he saved it, but he can't enjoy it anymore. He has to go somewhere else because of the damage he's experienced. And how many times have we seen people that have been damaged by the experiences that they have had that we consider to be heroes? People like war veterans and such. They have come back with PTSD and a whole variety of ailments. Not every single one, obviously, but a lot of folks do, and they can't really fit into the world that they have fought to save. Like for instance, I know some people had parents who were fought in World War II, and they talked to me about that. You know, they knew bad things happened. Their dad would never talk about it, but he would have these horrifying dreams and wake up the whole house in the middle of the night. And he just never really seemed to be happy anymore because of the experiences he had in this great, gigantic hero's journey. So it's interesting to me how much of the hero's journey we see in all aspects of pop culture. Yes, I agree with Mr. Bowman here. Gandalf really suits the hero narrative too, complete with a transfiguration. He's a Christ figure in that story.
Mm-hmm.
He dies and he comes back from the dead with renewed power and now has a higher position than he had before. So did I answer that, or did I take off in the la la land?
No, absolutely. As a matter of fact, well, speaking of Gandalf and Frodo and all that, you know, the Lord of the Rings, it doesn't always have to be just one character story.
Right.
Going back to the Lord of the Rings, for example, yes, you have Frodo's journey, which is definitely the hero's journey. You have Gandalf's story, which is another path. And like you said, he is a very a Christ-like figure, because for one thing, Tolkien was a devout Catholic, so there's that. But other characters as well, even Frodo's companion, Samwise, he's definitely transfigured. He's not literally, but he's changed by this journey. The human characters like Aragorn, you know, he's changed. All these characters go through this journey, so it's the heroes, plural, journey in the case of the Lord of the Rings.
Tolkien said that in his mind, Sam was the real hero. You know, we talk about Frodo and all were involved in the hero's journey, but he said that Sam was the real hero at the core of the story, because without Sam, Frodo could have never made it to the mountain, and his other companions got split off into, you know, different versions of the hero's journey where they did things that were heroic as well. But the central story, that Sam really was the ultimate hero in the story, because, you know, without him, you know, Frodo would have bit the dust back when he got stabbed by the Morgul blade at Weathertop,
exactly.
Monsoon.
Yes. Yeah.
And so,
absolutely.
And I thought that was interesting, because I always kind of felt like Sam wasn't really getting his due as terms of being heroic, because he did all sorts of things that were extremely heroic, and he was definitely not the landed gentry character, if you will, because you know all those other guys, you know, Frodo and Merry and Pippin, you know, they're all landed gentry types, powerful families in the Shire. Sam is just a guy. He's the hired hand. His daddy worked for Frodo as a gardener, and kind of like a serf, he's working for Frodo as his gardener, and he's really the only ordinary person in the whole story when you get right into it. And he turns out to be the ultimate hero. And I think maybe, I don't remember Tolkien actually saying this, but as I thought about it, I kind of think maybe he was trying to say that, you know, all these noblemen and these other guys that are doing stuff, that's great and fine, but they couldn't have done it without the ordinary guy.
Yeah.
Ordinary was the essential worker, just like during the pandemic. And unlike most people, Sam got his due at the end. Frodo left everything to him. He becomes mayor of the Shire. He's a big wheel. And but because he comes from that ordinary perspective, he doesn't have all that sense of entitlement that a lot of times people who come from a non-ordinary perspective carry with them. You know, kind of like the King of England seems to feel like he's pretty entitled, just because of where he was born.
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. I think the movie version really brought that out. You know, I mean, if you read the books, you definitely see that. But the movie version, especially the way Sean Astin played him. You really feel that, because it's funny, because Sam, of all the characters, of all the nobles and the elves and the other hobbits, who's the person that you see at the very end? Sam. You see Sam with his wife and his kids, and he's back at the Shire, and
That's
and
true.
he's
That's
gone
very
through this
true.
journey.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, definitely. I think because Tolkien himself came from a very humble background, and I think, and although he had the opportunity to he went to school, and he had a lot of help going to school, but it was never, I mean, he was an Oxford Don,
Yeah.
was an expert in linguistics, and
He was friends with C.S. Lewis. They used to
he
go
was
out and get
friends with C.S.
beers.
Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And Oscar Wilde.
Even
Not
though they had
Oscar
a little bit of
Wilde,
a
sorry.
falling out at one
They
point.
did, yeah.
But
And
yeah,
C.S.
there was,
Lewis never came into the church, so that was another little thing they
yeah.
had, their
Oh,
theological differences.
C.S. Lewis eventually converted. He
I don't think he
became.
did. I think he held out because he had a girlfriend. Someone Google it. I'm pretty sure he never came in. He never actually did it.
He
Well,
never became
yeah.
Catholic, but I think
Right. He never
that is-
became, that's what I'm saying. He never became Catholic, but he was theologically
Oh.
almost entirely aligned, but he never came
Yeah,
in. He had an
yeah,
outstanding
yeah.
relationship that he couldn't.
yeah, he was Anglo-Catholic, through the
Mhm.
Anglican Church, but not an
Right,
actual.
right,
He
yeah.
didn't become an actual Roman Catholic.
Right,
Yeah.
right. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, but you were talking about Tolkien and his background, his humble beginnings, and then he ends up as an
humble
Oxford
beginnings.
Don. Yeah.
I mean, as a young man, he is, he's thrust into World War One. So he saw the horrors of war, and a lot of that informed his idea of, he based a lot of what Mordor looked like on the battlefields that he saw, and so he knew war. He knew what it was.
And he also based some of that stuff on the harsh toll industrialization had taken on the English countryside as well. Like, I think that's what the whole Isengard story arc is about.
Yes.
Where he goes in and, the Saruman doesn't care about living things. He only cares about things he can make. And so, he destroys a beautiful place for evil purposes. And you get right down to it, capitalism is an evil purpose for a lot of, except for the people who are benefiting from it, which are not very many people anymore.
Right.
Sorry, that
yeah.
was a political rant there. I had to throw that in, but
Yeah.
he was.
Well, it's interesting that
horrified by what industrialization was doing to his beloved England of the countryside, like you were saying.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So all of that, I mean, that's part of the writer's experience, is you take, they always say, write what you know. Well, he wrote what he knew, and created this fictional story. But still, at the heart of it is that monomyth, that the hero's journey.
Right.
And I mentioned Star Wars, which is very obviously, very purposefully based on that journey of the hero. But it's kind of become an argument now as to who the hero actually is. Is it Luke, or who the story is actually about? Is it about Luke, or is it about Darth Vader, aka Anakin, Luke's father? Because when you go back to the prequels, whatever you might think of them, you get that.
Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar Binks was a very controversial figure in our generation.
Yeah, you can't always hit it out of the park.
Misa like to go to. Sorry, I had to.
Misa's a terrible character. Misa got written out.
He did. He makes the nomination.
Misa screwed everything up.
Misa don't want to be racist.
And that's a big
So anyway,
sorry, Jar Jar. Sorry, fans
yeah.
of Jar Jar. There are fans of
Yeah,
Jar Jar,
there
and I
are
apologize.
actually fans of Jar Jar. This is kind of weird.
I
Actually,
don't
you know,
want
when I
to
saw the
offend
when I saw the original trilogy, that trilogy, Jar Jar didn't bother me. Yeah, he's a little annoying,
Yeah.
but as far as whatever, it's like okay,
Yeah, he didn't bother me
it's
initially either.
it's a character.
Well, I
Um,
subscribe to the whole redemption of Anakin Skywalker for the first 6 movies. I know we're just talking about Luke, and you're saying different interpretations, but it's I believe it's it's the whole thing is ultimately the redemption of Anakin Skywalker, because he starts
right,
off as
yeah.
this powerful. He starts off as a slave, literally on Tatooine, and he ends up killing the evil emperor. So he well, in the last 3 movies they just kind of blew that out of the water, because it's like Anakin just wasted his life. He didn't bring balance to the Force. Oh, the Force Awakens, we got to do this other stuff, and it's like, really, seriously, we have to add this to an already complete mythology. It's like, oh, and wait, here at the very end, the Emperor's still fucking alive. Oh,
It was a clone, though. It was a clone. See,
yeah, it was a
he's
clone.
already thinking ahead. It's like because he had a
Clone
clone army, so of course he would have had it.
Clone
Anyway. Anyway,
he's serious, and he's still alive. It's like,
he's
so
still alive. Yeah.
why? I don't understand, man. Make it stop. That's one way to mess up a good
But there was
mythology.
the beginning of a whole new saga. Come on. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I can't wait for the
Oh,
Star Wars fanatics to be weighing in on this. There's going to be a lot of intensity there, because Star Wars fans are very divided on issues like this.
Raise the hero.
Yeah.
And I thought
I'm still miffed about the way they killed off Han Solo. Spoiler alert.
Oh yeah.
Everybody's seen it, hopefully. If you haven't seen it, then we can't help you guys.
Really, that's the way you got to take out one of the central characters of the original saga, or at least the middle saga.
Sticking with the lightsaber, turn it on.
But I mean, it does make sense. The death of the father.
Yeah.
We've had that. We had that with Anakin, and now this is sort of a twist on that, where instead of the son saving the father, the son kills the father, and that's another very mythic, destroying the old gods to bring up the new gods. It's part of the mythic tradition.
Like the Olympians killing off the Titans in Greek mythology.
Exactly, yeah, and I think that's kind of what that was getting at. Yeah, the Olympians destroying the Titans. So still you see that mythological base there. But I want to talk. Somebody mentioned. I think maybe Fred Bowman mentioned national mythologies, national myths, and that's another thing. I was talking about westerns, and the myth of the Old West is part of an overall mythology of America that Americans have created. But there's also something that kind of really what turned out to be, I think, a very negative myth, and that is the idea of manifest destiny. This idea that we were meant to rule spread out from coast to coast, to the detriment of all the native species. My God, to the detriment of native populations, indigenous populations, who were shunted aside, forced off their land, outright murdered. I mean, let's call it what it was. It was an extermination, a genocide.
Genocide, yeah, absolutely.
Of these native tribes.
Day one.
All because of this idea of, this land, really, God wanted us to have all this land, and all you heathens are in our way. Essentially, I mean, that is And of course, Manifest Destiny has morphed into American exceptionalism, which is another myth in pretty much every sense of the term. So, Alan, do you want to speak to that? Can you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I think when I first got my eyes open to the difference between American history and American mythology was when I read Howard Zinn's book, A People's History of the United States. I don't know if you've ever read that or not, but it's well worth your time. And Zinn was pointing out things like this, and it occurred. And I've interacted now with people who are part of the indigenous community of the Americas, and the whole myth of American exceptionalism that somehow or other God gave us the right as white people to come along here and, you know, take over the whole country and quash every little teeny bit of native culture that was here before we got here, and go ahead and wipe out all the natives too. That's cool by us. That is a horrible travesty that's still being perpetrated through the bans on the wrong kind of history, like Florida is doing and Texas is in the process of doing. And people still buy into it, particularly folks that are on the right wing and who love Donald Trump and that whole idea. You know, I remember Rush Limbaugh. I hope he's rotting in hell right now. I still remember Rush Limbaugh was like, American exceptionalism, American exceptionalism. Americans are not exceptional. And if you look back at it, historically speaking, every conquering empire had this idea that they were somehow or another exceptional. The British thought they were exceptional. The Japanese, prior to the end of World War II, thought they were exceptional. The Germans, the German Empire, they thought they were exceptional. And they carry that mythology of exceptionalism to the point where they finally get smacked down. And they have to realize, well, you know, I guess we really aren't all that exceptional. But it usually takes some sort of really violent overthrow of the powers that be, either through a war that the exceptional people started, or through some kind of economic collapse. And the thing with the economic collapse, like say with Germany during World War II, arguably speaking, if you look back at the two nations, the Second Reich, which was Kaiser Wilhelm's, what he ruled over, the German Empire, and Germany in 1939, the Kaiser was operating from a much more powerful position. The industry was much more developed. You know, they had an integrated system of not only the things that were going on in their empire, but in their actual country, but they had overseas holdings and such, and they'd had hundreds of years to get all that stuff up to speed, and it all consolidated in 1870 when the German Empire was born by making Kaiser Wilhelm I the German emperor. I'm taking off on a tangent here. Let me scooch back over. Anyhow, when the Germans lost World War I and then they had a revolution and they went to the Weimar Republic, a lot of people were dissatisfied with how things were going. And so they were ripe for a new mythology. And Hitler's mythology wasn't based on the Second Reich. He wasn't saying, let's go back to the good old days of Kaiser Wilhelm. He took and created an entirely unrealistic backstory that goes back to what he would talk about. His was the Third Reich, but there was the First Reich. And the Third Reich was going to be like that, except it was going to last for 1,000 years. And it was this great and glorified, perfectly pure German ethno-state. And people bought into it, just like I have to say Donald Trump is preaching this America, make America great again. We want to go back to a great purified golden time of American greatness, like the 1950s, or actually they want to go farther back than that, like the 1890s. And these national mythologies are ultimately destructive not only of the people who get in the way of the steamroller, the manifest destiny or whatever you call your particular manifestation of this mythology, but the people of the country themselves, because ultimately you can't sustain that because it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story that we're telling ourselves that's based on nothing in reality whatsoever. Because if you go through and look at reality, you find that things are often very much different than the magical story tells. Even something like World War II, the Good War, where we were fighting the Nazis. The United States could not have won that war by themselves. We had to have the Allies. We had to have the British. We had to have the French and all these other different folks to help us win. And we didn't do it just because we're the great Americans. We did it because we integrated everything we did with what was going on. And we got away from this myth that we had to acknowledge that we need each other. You look at wartime propaganda from the United States, and you find this over and over again. Even the Russians, the Soviet Union, they were our friends, and we need to work with them. They're not our enemies. And then after the war was over, and everybody started pulling their mask off and showing what they were really interested in, then things started going south, and we ended up with the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union, and all these other things. But Putin is doing that same thing in Russia. He's harking back to this great golden age. Not so much people keep talking about, he loves Stalin. No, he's not, he may kind of manifest as a Stalinist, but he's really an imperialist. He wants to be Tsar Putin. That's his whole goal. He wants to be Tsar Putin the First, or Vladimir, whatever he wants to call himself. And he's, it's a fascist kind of idea, because fascism has to have a mythology to root itself in. Because if you talk about reality, reality is not all that pretty. It's not a lot of fun to deal with. But mythology, now there you can go to town. You can make up anything you want to, as long as you keep people away from the actual construct of history. And that's why, as a person who's always been fascinated by history, I believe history is so very, very important. And so very few people understand is why we are in the situation we're in the United States and in Russia and these other places that are adopting these right-wing fascist kind of ideals, because they're allowing themselves to be sucked in to this mythology that these people are putting forth. America was better when we didn't have all these brown-skinned people here and these black people here. We need to get rid of them. I beg to differ there, buddy. Got a problem there if that's what you think. But that's part of the mythology. Like, for instance, folding chairs. A black man invented the current version of the folding chair. Where would we be without folding chairs? And black people have done a lot of other things. Hispanic people have done things. Indigenous Americans have done that. Everybody who has come to this country, you can find some representative of their particular ethnicity that has done something. But the mythology of Make America Great Again, or any of these fascist type mythologies, cuts them out and says, no, they didn't do anything. They're parasites sucking off of the American, strong, brave American white man. Not, maybe the white woman gets in there a little bit, but it's mostly the American white man. And as such, the mythology is going to ultimately destroy our country, because no fascist state has ever lasted beyond, let's see, Franco lasted the longest. And the only reason I think he lasted as long as he did was because nobody was really interested in conquering Spain. He wasn't bothering anybody, Yeah, go ahead, Franco, do your thing. You're going to die, and then that's going to be it. And sure enough, he died. And what was the first thing they did? They got their king back, and they stopped being a fascist state. So fascism is dangerous. American Manifest Destiny was a milder version of that. But now that we've got these people who are very invested so much in a really fascist ideology, Manifest Destiny and American exceptionalism, and trying to turn the United States into a white ethno state, those things are even more dangerous and destructive. And that's all because of buying into an arguably, demonstrably untrue mythology about America.
Yeah. Well, I think now we hear, people talking about Christian nationalism, which is yet another version of that. This idea that, and again, and it goes back again to manifest destiny. It goes back uh, to that mythology right there, American exceptionalism, and now we have this really, it's almost a crusade to create, to basically just ignore the establishment clause in the First Amendment and create a state religion. To say
Yes.
that, I mean, we're already seeing even the Supreme Court sort of chipping away at the establishment clause. I mean, the recent ruling about the website designer, which I think we talked about in a previous episode, where, and again, this is what's crazy. That ruling was based on a hypothetical. It wasn't even based on an actual incident. It was based
Yeah.
on, well, what if I'm forced to make a website for something that I disagree with, and it violates my deeply held beliefs? And the Supreme Court said, yeah, what about that? No, that in itself is discrimination. And so it opens the door, or it has opened the door for other people to say, well, wait a minute. So we can discriminate. It's okay. We can ignore these anti-discrimination laws because they're discriminatory against us because of our deeply held beliefs. And just the whole idea of basing laws on people's beliefs, to me, is completely contradictory to the whole point of why we would have a constitution in the first place. I mean, that's
Exactly.
why the founders did not write these amendments just willy-nilly, as we've said before. And there was an absolute reason why the Establishment Clause is the first thing in the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion and the free exercise thereof. Uh, I mean, it's almost, I don't want to say an afterthought, but it was clearly secondary. And yet, well, not all Christians, but evangelical Christians are making it sound like that is the important part of the amendment. I mean, it's the same thing that people do with the Second Amendment and that whole, keep and bear arms thing, where they say, well, the Constitution says we can have all the guns we want and we can have any kind of gun. No, that's not what the Constitution says. That's what the Second Amendment says. They keep ignoring that first part, that a well-regulated militia, in order to form, in order to have maintain a free state. That's the important part of that amendment, not the keep and bear arms part. That's just basically a codicil to that first part. Is obviously, you need, if you're going to have a militia, you need to be able to, keep your weapons handy. It was, it was meant because the guys who wrote that, Jefferson and all those guys, especially Jefferson. Jefferson did not want a standing army because they just fought one. They just say, hey, look what the British did. They have this big, huge standing army. They came in and almost wiped us out, but we were able to, turn it around. So no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to have a standing army. But eventually, as the nation grew, and other voices came in and said, no, we do need a standing army. We do need to have a professional, core of soldiers to defend the country, especially after the invasion of 1812, or the War of 1812, it's called. That kind of was like, see, we need an army. Come on, the British, they came over. So like, okay.
Again.
Yeah, again. And so the original intent of the Second Amendment was kind of really made obsolete by having a standing army. And now, of course, people have turned it around and said, well, since we don't need that first part, that we got that second part, and so And of course, the NRA, when it went from being just a little social club for gun enthusiasts and hunters, suddenly became this political force, thanks to young right wing uh, conservatives who came in and said, "No, by golly, you know, they're taking our guns away." And of course, that's another myth right there that uh, that we keep spreading, that or people keep spreading, that you know there's one side that wants to take everybody's guns away and leave everybody helpless because that way they can take over, and all that nonsense. And and it is nonsense.
One of the things that fits into the whole mythology we've been talking about is the mythology of the Old West. Everybody had a gun, and there was always having
Right.
shootouts, all this kind of stuff. And you look back at the actual history of it. Most towns of any size, when you came into town, you had to surrender your firearm.
Yeah,
You didn't get to
exactly.
just drag it around and shoot people.
Right,
The murder
exactly.
rate was way, 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 way exponentially lower than
Hmm.
it is now. And that most people, if they had a gun, it was like a shotgun or something like that to take care of varmints or to hunt, something to hunt with. And you only need
Right.
like a single shot rifle or a single shot or maybe double barrel shotgun to hunt. And
Yeah.
the NRA has taken what they used to do, which was like I said, social club for gun owners, gun safety. They were really big into teaching people how to use guns safely and things
Hmm.
like that. And when those right wingers took it over and turned it into the gun club, death club, uh, that's part of the problem that we have now. And there's a case coming up before the Supreme Court next year where the very real possibility that the Supreme Court could come along and gut all of the federal agencies that regulate all the like EPA, ATF, all these different organizations could
Hmm.
gut their ability to regulate anything. I was just reading about it, kind of freaked me
Yeah.
out early. And
Yeah. Yeah.
again, it's all in service of that mythology, the Gilded Age too. We don't talk about the Gilded Age a lot because it was a horrible time for ordinary people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think
Andrew
that
Carter
yeah, I think
gave
that's
guys at slave wages and
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and right, and speaking of slaves, you mentioned the in Florida, and of course Texas is to follow along because crazy follows crazy. Uh,
Yeah.
that whole idea of you know forcing teachers to basically tell a lie, to teach their students that, hey, slavery wasn't so bad because they learned a skill after all. It's basically on the job training. So hey, come on.
Yeah.
I don't know what all these black people were so whining about. I mean, come on, they learned a skill out of that. Well, first of
Yeah.
all, no, slavery was no picnic. I mean, we have diaries, we have the stories from actual slaves
And we have
themselves
pictures of the
telling
things that we
us,
do to them.
no, yes, this was bad times here. And
Yes.
also people who were enslaved, the Africans who were enslaved, because that's what they were they had no idea that they might actually be freed one day. They thought this was it. We are, the only way we're going to be free is if we try to escape somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
or die. That those were the only two paths to freedom that they had. You know, Either try their luck with the Underground Railroad or some other form, and escape to a non-slave holding state. You know, or or die trying, or die on the job, on die out in the field somewhere, or
Yeah.
because I can't imagine somebody in that position going, yeah, well, yeah, things are tough, but hey, at least we're learning something. We're learning a skill. I mean, we still got to suffer massive whips, but hey, things ain't bad. We got a roof over our house, we got food, we got clothes. I mean, they're giving us all this stuff. What are we complaining about?
Yeah, I
That's
can't
the
see that
narrative.
because
That's what
yeah.
they want people to believe.
Well, if you've ever, like
And
I say, if
it's
you've ever
like,
seen
no.
pictures of them, of slaves, you see that the clothes they were given were, I mean, they were rags. They got like, I think, one pair of pants and one shirt per year. And they had to make that last a whole year. And they might have got a
Hmm.
warm jacket, I think. One.
Hmm.
That's it. Because, just like one of the big things in capitalism is holding down labor costs. That's the same kind of deal. You got to hold down your labor costs.
Hmm.
And
Exactly.
what's the cheapest stuff we can feed them? Ooh, cottonseed cakes. Yeah, that'll work. And that's horrible.
Hmm.
There's no excuse for treating another human being that way. Even there's just not. And the thing is, people say, "Oh, well, it was different back then." You just don't understand, there, buddy. Yeah, I do understand. There were also people back then who were saying the same thing, saying, "This is awful. This is terrible. You shouldn't do this. You
Hmm.
shouldn't treat another human being that way." So
Right. Right.
we're not
There
applying
was.
modern morality to the past. People in the past
Yeah.
understood it was bad too,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's just it amazes me the kind of excuses we make for our bad behavior in history. But
Hmm.
oh, that's just the
Yeah.
way they used to do things. Well, yeah, that's true. They did do things that way back then, but that doesn't excuse. Yeah, like Mr. Bowman here says, slavery is the worst kind of capitalism. It's dream capitalism, basically.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
every capitalist dreams he's got a workforce that he can do anything the hell he wants to with, and nobody's going to stop him.
Right.
He wants to have sex with the beautiful secretary. Hey, he's having sex with the beautiful secretary. He's just doing whatever he wants to do. And that's every capitalist's ultimate dream. They say, oh no, yeah, you do. You do. Deep down inside, you evil hoarder, you. Because that's
Yeah.
all they feel. They
Exactly. Yeah. You have people at the top. I And I was going to talk about this when we talked about at the very beginning, when I was introducing the show and talking about the strike, the WGA strike, and I know there are people who are probably saying, well, so what? I mean, a bunch of overpaid writers, you know, whining about wanting more money. No, that's not what it's about. And please get the idea of overpaid out of your head when it comes to workers. Because here's the thing, and here's my rant on this. A job is a job, whatever it is. Whether you're flipping burgers or you're writing a screenplay, it's a job. You're being paid to do. And that's what wages are. Wages are not some reward that you get for a job well done. No, it's compensation for your time, your effort, and your skill. And remember that it's compensation. It's 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 somebody saying, "Hey, you know what? You've done all this stuff for me. Here's money. This is what you are owed for that time, because that's really what we're paying for. We're paying for our time, and effort and skills, or that's what we're getting paid for."
Right.
And
And
workers,
I love that you said that because, it once you actually deconstruct what the transatlantic slave trade was, everybody can see. I mean, it's like felony after felony after felony. If you're religious, it's sin after sin after sin. We have rape, we have kidnapping, we have violence, and we have battery, we have people
murder.
abducting other people's children, and then just common everyday torture, where you're sort of like messing with people and there's psychological torture and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
who in their right mind would think it was okay to tell anybody, you can't leave this room? That's false imprisonment. You can't do that. You can never do that. Oh, well, I paid someone so that I could tell this person to do this or to do that. No, that's objectively wrong. There's not a religion on the planet. So these people saying they're conservative, well, go back in time. How many times was slavery codified racially along racial lines the way it was here, where there was mass abduction of people and then based on genetics, they were considered subhuman and stuff. This is all eugenics shit that came up much later in human history. Other slavery, like right now, slavery is actually alive and well, and it's the most prolific that it's ever been, and that's in North Africa, that's in Ukraine. There's a lot of sex trafficking. The United States is really bubbling with slavery, but even then, it's not codified based on, well, you were born into it, or you look like this, or your genetics are like this. And then this idea that you would just, like I said, think of every crime or every sin you can imagine, and it was inherent to the way that they were operating. And, you can't defend it. Even if you could defend paying somebody less than, like, if you own if you own a franchise of Burger King and you say, well, I have to do this, or I have to keep these shifts or whatever, even if you go there, that now we're starting to get into a lack of ethical quality of life. But then you can actually become a criminal, and who would not say that's a bad person? And this is like being a bad boss squared, a million times. It's just awful. And when you were talking about wages, Manny, the reason why I wanted to say something is I wanted to say, yeah, I mean, anybody on the planet would agree that if somebody is working their butt off and doing their job, you need to be able to compensate them. And it's at will employment. Why would you? So all of these people who are saying slavery was good because accidentally maybe someone was forced to learn a trade, well, tell that to kidnapping victims who, tell that to Elizabeth Smart then, okay? Just tell that to anyone who's been abducted and taken from their home, made to do. And to be honest, freedom is so important that even if you were never asked to do anything else, the fact that you can't go and see your family, you can't go out when you want to go out, you can't sleep when you want to sleep, that is inherently wrong. And it's codified now. So the law has caught up to that. But it just is mind-boggling how anyone can possibly defend it. And I have heard, Alan, I have heard people defending it, just like you say. And they have these little things that they say, like, well, it wasn't as bad, or it was. And you have to remember, even in that era, most people around the world and most Americans knew it was wrong. Most Americans knew it was wrong. So this was an aberrant type of philosophy. This was not a normal thing. And like I said, if you examine other slave trades, like the one we have in present day, or if you look at the Greeks or the Roman culture or the Ottoman Empire, it never was codified in this way based on your genetics. And then, like, you're just there, your family, for how many generations being forced and being tortured over and over again. I mean, it really was, it was something that we should not normalize. And it's not a traditionalist standpoint. Traditional people of any religion or any atheist background do not think that torturing human beings is a normal state of mind. It is absolutely weird, and it shouldn't have been tolerated then. And of course it wasn't. That's why it was abolished, thank God. But the fact that it was allowed to go on at all is pretty shocking. I'm still shocked by the transatlantic slave trade. I think we all should be. I think it's shocking because, like the Holocaust, it's absolutely like the Holocaust.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's funny that you brought up the Holocaust, because the same argument that's being used about African American or the slave trade is almost being used about the Holocaust. That, well, yeah, it was terrible, but hey, all those Jewish people who were in those camps, they learned a skill. So how could that be a bad thing?
Yeah, and the gulag and the labor camps of the Soviet Union, we all were learning skills, right?
Yeah.
And the American prison system.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. Like the chain gangs. Angola prison in Louisiana still has a chain gang.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, well, the American prison system is the biggest
modern
source
slavery
of slave labor in the United States, because the 13th Amendment, while it abolished slavery for non-governmental actors, you can still be sentenced to be a slave.
Yes,
if you commit a crime.
That's right. So thank you for clarifying that. America still does have sanctioned slave, like they get paid like maybe 2 cents, an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can tell a prisoner what to do. You can falsely imprison him if he's innocent, and you can imprison him just generally, even if he's guilty of it. But of course, you take away their freedom, you take away their clothes, they can't see their family. So thank you, Alan, for pointing that out.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, something else I wanted to add is, you were talking about crimes earlier. One of the biggest crimes that capitalism commits is not just not paying people enough, is actual wage theft. When you think about it, in a capitalist system, the guy that's, quote, making all the money up at the top, he's stealing your productivity and accruing it to himself. It's one thing, okay, yeah,
exactly.
we pay you some money to run the corporation, or you pay yourself some money to run the corporation, and then we divide the profit out amongst those folks who really did all the work. That's one thing. That's not how capitalism works. Capitalism says, okay, you're going to come along here, you're going to work for me, and yeah, you may be generating $150,000 worth of value for me every year, but I'm going to pay you 20. And I'm going to keep the rest of that, and that's wage theft. Not, and in addition to that, there's actual what I would call illegal wage theft, which is where people actually make you work and don't pay you. That used to happen a lot in the grocery business when I was younger. I don't know if it still does or not, where they'd say, okay, we still haven't gotten our overnight stocking stuff done. You guys go clock out and come back down here and finish. And they would do that, and they would not get paid for it because
you're off the clock. Yeah, they use that excuse, right? Yeah,
that was wage theft. And
absolutely.
The thing about wage theft in the United States, when you have people actually stealing what they're supposed to be getting paid from their employees, that's not a crime. That's a civil offense. The Labor Relations Board, they can tell you, okay, yeah, you stole those guys' money, you need to pay them back. They can't arrest anybody, can't send anybody to jail, and can't do anything to them. The biggest crime wave of all is wage theft. Way more than shoplifting, way more than gangs of people breaking into malls and stealing stuff out of high-end stores. It's businessmen, good old businessmen, stealing people's well, I won't even say just compensation. I'll just say compensation, because they should all be getting paid a lot more than what they are.
Absolutely.
Because think about the value they create. Even somebody who's not a particularly good worker is still creating value for their employer.
Right.
And so, yeah, but yeah, slavery, that's the worst form of wage theft, because those people that were being enslaved, they didn't get any of the benefits. They didn't even get a salary. They got some crappy clothes and maybe some food. Maybe.
But they learned a valuable skill.
How Massa was feeling that day, whether he was going to dish out the victuals or not. Here, have a cottonseed cake.
Yep. Yeah. M.M. Falwell. Teachers work a lot of hours. They do not get paid for it. Absolutely.
That is so true.
Absolutely. Teachers are, in most countries, teachers are actually valued because education is valued. That's not the case in America anymore, and that's unfortunate. And we're going to do a show on education later on. But yeah, it's exactly, and so we'll say, workers, no matter if you're called a worker, if you're an employee, well, no, whether you call it a job, whether you call it a career, or whether you call it, a vocation, it doesn't matter. You're still doing a job. You're still working. And the problem that I have, thanks to President Reagan, who, I don't even want to get into him, but and kind of bringing in this whole trickle down theory of economics, this top down theory. What trickle down really means, if you really look at it, it means that we should be grateful for the crumbs that falls from our master's table. That's what trickle down really means. It has nothing to do with getting paid.
Different perspective on that.
Yeah.
Trickle down is we should be grateful that our masters have deigned to urinate upon us.
Well, yeah, taking the term trickle to a literal stance. But the point is that what happens is it's a misunderstanding of how the economy actually works. And of course the people at the top, I mean, it's all about power. You know, the people at the top, you know, the CEOs and the heads of corporations and business owners, as you said, they adhere to the golden rule, the American golden rule, which is if you hold those who hold the gold get to rule. And that's the problem right now, is that we have a very small group of people who control the majority of the wealth in this country. And it's like George Collins said, it's a club and you're not in it. You know, we are not in this club, you know, of millionaires and billionaires, you know, but what I was going to say is the point that they're missing is that we seem to divide things into two categories. We have workers and we have customers. The problem with that is that workers and customers are one in the same thing.
Yes, yes.
That's why
yes,
we work.
Yes.
We work for a living in order to be able to buy things and pay for things like rent and cars and what have you. You know, not even luxury items, but just, you know, the basics, the necessities of life. You know, in order to live, a roof over our heads and foods in our refrigerators and what have you. You know, or to have a refrigerator. You know, those sort of things. And that's how the economy works, is people buying stuff creates the need. You know, it's the first rule of economics, you know, supply and demand. You know, workers create the demand and manufacturers, businesses creates the supply, but workers also create supply as well. And that's what the people at the top are missing, because they're too busy building rocket ships and submarines and, you know, creating boxing matches amongst themselves instead of doing what they should be doing, which is paying their workers. And that's what the whole issue is right now. And that's what the whole fight right now is going on in California with the writer's strike. And that's why I wanted to mention that. That's why it's so important to support anyone. I mean, I know it's an inconvenience. I know people say, oh, you know, forget that, because as the saying goes, rising tides lift all boats. And whenever we support workers, regardless of where they are, regardless of whether they're poor burger flippers, there's still but here's the thing, and this is something else that I wanted to say. When you go to a McDonald's, who do you see? You see the guy behind the counter or the woman behind the counter. You see the burger flippers doing their job. You see the people at the window, you know, and they're all doing work. You see them. You know they're real. When do you ever see the CEO of McDonald's? Does anybody even know what the heck he does? No. But we see the workers. You go into any factory floor, you see the workers. You never see the CEOs unless they're, you know, on camera for whatever reason, some promotion or whatever, you know, but you never know. What do they do? Why are they being paid millions of dollars for whatever the hell it is they do? And the people who are actually doing the work, you know, why are we complaining? Why are we saying burger flippers don't deserve $15 an hour? Really? They don't? Because they're the ones making your food, not the guy who owns McDonald's, not even the guy who owns the franchise, that particular franchise, you know? So anyway, I know we've probably strayed far from the topic of mythology, but that is a form of mythology. That is that trickle down, that idea of the ball, you know, and it's social Darwinism, which is in itself a form of mythology. It's a social mythology. You know, it's a story that somebody created to again aggrandize themselves and say, hey, we are the superior thing here, and the rest of you have to do what we say because we are, clearly better. We know better than you poor peasants down there, and it's that sort of
Well,
feudal mythology. I'm sorry,
and
Alan, you wanted to say something.
that's part of another stream of American mythology that goes all the way back to the first white people to land on the eastern coast, the Puritans and the separatists. They had this idea in their head that, okay, first of all, God chooses who is going to be saved and who's going to go to hell. That's Calvinism, double predestination. And they believed that you would know you were one of the elect, one of the people going to heaven, if you did well in your endeavors, in your business and in your farming and all this. And so that gets carried over to, hey, if you're a good person or an exceptional person, or you're part of the elect, you're going to be well off. If you're poor, that means you're bad, you're evil, you're depraved, you're doing something wrong, buddy, and God's mad at you. And then that kind of that mythology carries forward to today,
the present day. Yeah, exactly.
Why do we lift up people who are demonstrably doing bad things to their workers? Well, he's got a lot of money and he's a self-made man. No, he's not. There are almost no self-made billionaires. In fact, I can't think of what who really was self-made. Elon Musk's daddy, he owned an emerald mine, or at least several emerald mines. Jeff Bezos' daddy had a lot of money. Bill Gates' daddy had a lot. I mean, all these guys they may not have as much money as they have now, but they all come from a baseline that's well above your baseline and my baseline in terms of income. They're not self-made men. That's a mythology. That's a myth. And we hold these guys up, and it's like saying, oh, look, all the money they got, God loves them. They must be good people, and they're self-made. And it's like, the only self-made hoarders I know are the people that have stacks of newspaper in their house up to the ceiling. And that's, economically speaking, what these people are doing. They have more money than they will ever spend in their lifetime. They have more power than any human being should actually be allowed to have. And anybody else, if they were hoarding stuff like that, we would say, oh, this person's mentally ill. I think we need to give them some help. But if they're hoarding money, that's a whole different ballgame. And that's how the mythology shifts what should be a pathology, thinking about other people, billionaires and folks like that. There's something wrong with them. I mean, really, seriously. There's something wrong with them if they feel like that. They have to have that much money, and they have to be that quote successful in order to, build penis-shaped rockets and all this other stuff that these folks do. That's not normal. That's not, they've even done, I've read about a research study they did where they took a monkey and they gave this monkey all the bananas. And instead of keeping them for himself, he would keep giving them away to the other monkeys. And then socialist fruit. And it's like the monkey,
socialist monkey.
So that's right. Socialist monkey. Animals don't hoard food. They don't hoard stuff like people do. And it's because of the mythology of, I think, mythology and a pathology. And the mythology reinforces that the pathology is good, because there are people who make lots and lots of money and they don't act like that. They don't make billions maybe, but they don't act like these people that are billionaires.
Right.
And
commie chimp. That's
commie chimp. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I'm commie chimp. But,
we didn't make a show, commie chimp.
And that's all part of that whole mythology. And it roots itself back in religion. Like so many mythologies do, they find themselves rooted in a particular version of religion. Some version of fundamentalism usually.
Yeah.
But yeah, stealing people's wages, stealing their livelihoods. Walmart puts some old man out of his business out of, when they come in. It's like, well, the best he can get's a door greeter, and he's lost a lifetime of investment in his business because Walmart comes in and literally steals his livelihood.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Obviously, I have to go to Walmart because you can't. There's very few of these other kind of places you can go to get the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And it puts you in a position where you find yourself, an unwilling participant in the mythological landscape, which is something, if you think about it, our government, is in Texas is dominated by the mythological landscape of, trickle down economics, all the stuff that the GOP pushes, Trumpism, and the mythical golden age when there weren't any immigrants. And oh my God, we got to stop those people coming across the river. They're invading our country. No, they're not. An invasion requires guns.
Yeah, and they kind of they've forgotten that they were the immigrants once.
Yeah.
I mean that's the forgotten part about that, is that it was white people who were the immigrants at one point. Because this Texas was a part of Mexico at one point.
That's right.
And so was Arizona and Mexico and part of California. Up into even what's now Oklahoma. It was all Mexican territory, and the Mexican government allowed a small number of immigrants from the United States, to come to Mexico, which was their first mistake. You invite white people anywhere, and pretty soon you don't have a country anymore. And I know that sounds terribly racist on my part, but check your history.
No, it's not right.
It's not nothing against white people, but come on. I mean,
I mean,
we try to,
that's what happens.
Yeah. So, and you talked about, the mythology of labor, and I think a lot of it too is we have this idea, brought forth. I think we've all heard of the Horatio Alger story of the rags to riches. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you work hard, and you too one day will be a millionaire. And the so-called American dream. Well, it's somebody else's dream apparently, because that's not entirely true. Because the poor people who've already made it to the top, again, thanks to daddy's money or however they got there, aren't letting you in. They're not going to let you share. They're not going to let you share in the wealth. I mean, that's why they're wealthy, because they're not sharing. They're hoarding. And you're right, exactly. Some old lady hoards 10 years of newspapers in her house, and she's dragged off to a loony bin, or she said, oh, well, there's something wrong with you, and that's a figure of pity. But hey, somebody hoards millions of dollars. Oh, you're a successful businessman. You're somebody to be admired. Elon Musk, who, by the way, did not invent Tesla. He bought it from another from these two guys. So he really had nothing to do with Tesla. He just bought the company. So he's not really an innovator, for whatever people might say.
Elon Musk is hugely overrated. Everything that everything he's ever been involved in, he bought from somebody else.
Exactly.
SpaceX. Yeah. I think maybe the Boring Company he might have actually started that, but I would really highly doubt that. He got that from somebody else probably.
Yeah. But again, that's one of those personal mythologies that we were talking about, the myth of the successful man or the self-made man. And it is a myth in the sense of not being real or not being true. So, but ultimately, how do we combat this? How do we break down these myths? I mean, nobody believes in these old religious myths anymore. Nobody believes in Zeus. Nobody believes in Odin. Well, I do, but I'm a pagan. No, but they're
Maybe
cool.
okay.
The old gods are cool. I think we need to bring them back. We need to bring back, Norse mythology. By God,
Thor,
for
Loki.
the first church of Odin. Come on, let's bring in Ragnarok. And that's the other thing.
Ooh,
Evangelical
and then
Christians
we have
are trying
the
to,
big
bring about the end of the world. You don't see pagans going out, we're trying to bring about Ragnarok, by golly. So
That's
anyway,
true.
Miss
Try to avoid
Renee, weigh in.
I
We
was
haven't
gonna
heard from you in a while.
I
Weigh
was
in on
gonna
this.
talk about when you talked about money hoarding. I really thought that was an interesting way of looking at it because it is kind of like a pathology, and not every culture values individualism and that type of individual wealth. So it is
Mhm.
a little bit of a cultural difference. Ubuntu is the famous thing where in Southern Africa, one of the tribes there, they had the children, they gave them bananas and they said, they put them at a tree and they said, now run and whoever wins, gets the bananas or whatever. And or it might've been one banana actually. And so all the children just joined hands and ran together and then split it. And of course, this shows that in their culture, they couldn't have enjoyed it themselves. It's not like they could
Mhm.
enjoy the banana watching their friends just sit there hungry. So to
Mhm.
them, that was what they valued. And so it's a difference of opinion. Yeah. I mean, the billionaires who have so much money that they don't know what to do with it. Like Alan was saying, if it were anything else, if it were tea, if I just sat here and all I did was drink tea all day, well, I'd be in the hospital, I'd be sick. But everyone would say, Renee, I think you got a problem. I mean, after the 17th cup of this, I think someone would say, Renee, that's a little, so, all things in moderation. And I think that's a
Right.
good point.
Or you had
We don't
crates
see
of tea
straight.
behind you or something.
Yeah, like what is this obsession, And it's like it's one of those things where I have noticed people giving leeway to people like that and not really looking at it. That's the mythology. Like if you were to say, like when I took a sociology course, I thought it was cool. There was this thing we had to read and it was written about this strange culture where people put their heads in ovens to dry their hair and they did all this stuff and you're supposed to be shocked and then at the end it reveals, well, this is how America would look from the outside looking in. And as an American, you're reading it and you're saying, these people are really weird. So you're not having that distance and you're not able to really put yourself far enough apart to say, why do we do what we do? That's why I love people who question things. There's certain people who always are questioning, and sometimes they can be annoying, that whole gadfly thing from
Mhm.
Shakespearean literature, the gadfly who's going to just call everyone out all the time. But they're doing God's work in a way, right? Because what they're
Right.
doing is
Yeah.
they're making you look at it from the outside in. I mean, and that's a gift. So we have to find ways of separating the mythology, which might be a really great narrative for lesson teaching or other things, but then also the hard, cold facts of reality of how this actually is. Like someone, like if a therapist were to sit down with Elon Musk and say to him, Elon Musk, say, baby, why are you, little boy, I think that you need to know, why are you having all of this? What is this fulfilling for you? Like, what is the point of it? Because at a certain point, it doesn't matter anymore. And there's studies on this. There's happiness studies where you do need to have a certain level of sustainability financially.
Right.
So, like people should be able to pay their bills and not have all of that stress. So in different
Mhm.
countries and in different years, that's going to be at a different level. And different people have different needs, their families, whatever. But after that tipping point, you don't get happier. You actually
Mhm.
don't. So the billionaire is not happier than someone who's like upper middle class and can actually pay all their bills. Not necessarily. And I think that's something to keep in mind. But mythology generally, it gives people hope. So I like what people say about Trump. They say Trump is a poor man's idea of what a rich man would be like. And,
Mhm.
with his gilded towers. I've been in the Trump Tower, by the way, and I didn't even see that it said Trump Tower on it. I went in, I wasn't biased. And I said, this is the gaudiest looking piece. Where am I? It looks so cheesy. And then I come out and it's Trump Tower. And I say, oh, okay, now I get it. But this
Yeah.
idea of, people who actually tend to be old wealth, you know, people who are like, they wear like jeans and they don't want people to know they're that wealthy. So
Right. Yeah.
Trump actually, he comes off as new money. I know that he inherited his money, but there's an uncouth style that doesn't resonate with people who are from the old money world. But he fulfills that for a certain type of working person who will look at that and look at the gilded stuff and look at someone who, you know, whatever oranges his face and thinks that's, you know, handsome. And that person who doesn't have anything and feels exhausted with life says, well, maybe, you know, at least that, you know, Trump exists. Maybe one day I could do it too. Maybe one day I could live like that. So the mythology keeps them going, even though it's a farce, and it's almost like a placebo effect. Every now and then, it probably, you know, people could read Aladdin and get inspired by Aladdin, and it can actually, you know, help to inspire us to move forward. So in that respect, mythology can be very helpful. Owning your narrative, you can take it down to the individual level and say, well, I'm going to own my narrative. I'm going to create this brand like Dolly Parton. You know, she's very careful about her brand, and she's a good businesswoman. So there are great ways to harness mythology for good, but unfortunately, of course, as we've been discussing, there's so many ways to do it for bad.
That's
very,
excellent points.
Yeah.
Because that's the
I think
mythology.
Yeah.
Do that for you.
All right. Well, I think we're going to give Miss Renee the last word here.
Reading all the comments here. Yeah, there's, you know, they're talking about, well, there were so many great comments actually. And we want to also greet the people who are on the replay squad, who are watching this later. We always enjoy our live audience, but replay squad, you hold it down. You hold it down. You really ground us. So we're very proud of the replay squad. And I wanted to say that Alan has agreed to come on another show here at Cosmos. So we'll be setting that up soon. We don't have a date. But if people want to know more about his personal journey and his career journey and basically his bio, we're going to be planning that very soon. So anyone who wants to know, which they've been asking, you will get to see Alan again, I promise you. And then
we're slowly dragging Alan into the Cosmos family.
Yes.
Just like I was dragged in.
Yes, we just sort of pull you guys in. I love it. It's a cult.
I thought I was out, and then they pulled me back in.
It is a little bit like a cult, you know. Come on.
But it's a good cult.
It's a really friendly, like if you're going to join a cult.
Nobody's drinking Kool-Aid. Nobody's drinking. Well,
we have good mythology here. We have
the good mythology. That's right.
Yes. So I want to tell everyone that tonight, coming on right after this in about an hour or so, check it out. We're going to have Burn It Down with Tom Cheshire, and it's going to be a great show.
It's going to be positive, man.
It's going to be
very positive.
I thought it was Tom for a second. I was like, oh, wait, which show am I in? Oh, man, I was having an out-of-body experience, Manny. Oh, my gosh, that was really scary. It was pretty accurate, especially,
bucket of fish.
I hope Tom is watching. Somebody tag Tom so he can watch it later. He's getting ready for the show most likely. But we have that. And then I also wanted to say MM Farwell is working again on Suicide Prevention Month. This is SPAM, SPAM. And she's got all these great events that are coming up in September, which is just right down the road. So stay tuned to Cosmos. Make sure you follow us on all of our socials at Cosmos Creative TV and participate in that, you know, because I feel like at this point in time, a lot of people are struggling, and it seems hard to find someone who doesn't know of someone or know of someone who knows of someone who has committed suicide even recently. Right. So it's definitely a hot topic. So those are my spiels for right now. And also, please follow Tardon Media YouTube channel, Dennis Tardon. Go to tardonmedia.com, and there's always great stuff going on over there. So yes, thank you. All right, Manny, back to you.
Right. Well, okay. A little plug for Mr. Tardon. He has on his show recently, Spontaneous Conversation. He's talked to Susie Gordon, who was once a director at she was involved with the FBI. Fascinating person. So please watch that. Next week on the show, we're going to be talking about music. And we have another special guest, David William Myers, who is a friend of the channel and who is just one of our just the great person himself. So we're going to be talking to him about music, and we're going to talk him into singing a few songs for him. For him.
Oh, yes, he's got a
Songs
beautiful
for us.
voice. Gosh, he
Wonderful
has a
voice.
gorgeous voice. Gorgeous.
Yeah. So by hook or by crook, we're going to get him to sing.
We are definitely going to. So did you hear
So,
that, David,
and
on the replay squad?
yes, yes. And he's he's been a great friend of our shows as well. A great commenter. And both on this show and on Two Guys, which that should be back sometime in mid-September as well. And I want to thank our special guest today, Alan Coffey, for
Thank
being
you,
on the show
Alan.
today and
My
giving us his insights on mythology, on American mythology, on the evils of capitalism, all that good stuff, which may or may not have anything to do with mythology, but it actually it does. So anyway, so thank you again for watching, and we'll catch you all later.